All right, Marcella Lundgren. And the title of her Bible lesson this morning, Give God Pleasure. Great title.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Why not give God pleasure? Give God all the pleasure God is capable of. In this four-part series, we're discussing the prodigal son story, but I'm going to couple this one with a verse from Luke 12:32, which says, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." Why not give God all the pleasure? Allow him or her to give you the kingdom, because it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Whenever or whatever you have a need, God can supply it. God has infinite resources with which to bless mankind. I read that for years and years and years and knew it, and I have proved it time and again. Now, with respect to the prodigal son story, how did these three characters, and they were really characters, if you really think about it, characters in the quotable state, because each one of them was such a special person to each one of us who studies the story. The first son knew that he had abundance, was very sure of it. Let's consider it. First, he took his inheritance from his father. He never doubted but what his father could share with him, the money that he had coming, an inheritance. And he went into the far country and he spent all this money. Not a very good steward, but on the other hand, he did have the money to spend and he got rid of it. Probably a little bit more hastily than we would approve of, but nevertheless he did. When he got into a situation that he wasn't very happy with, he had to go out and find a job, which he did. Pigsty wasn't a very good job, but he got a job. And then it occurred to him, wait a minute, I don't need to remain here. I can improve my situation by going back to my father. And he did. He traveled down the road, and of course, his father met him. And he supplied him with all the good things. Because he said to himself before he started home, if I go back to my father, I will have enough and to spare. In other words, he knew where his abundance lay. He knew where his abundance was. And he could give God the pleasure of giving him all the things he needed. Now let's consider the father. The father who never doubts that he has enough money, enough supply. Oh, and by the way, we want to talk about prosperity now in the context of having everything we need for our well-being. Not necessarily just money. Although I'll tell you, having been in the banking business, we always used to say money's so far ahead of everything else that, and it does supply. It does supply. Whatever is second, sort of secondary, really secondary. However, and money can't buy a lot of things. So we want to know that prosperity means having a sense of well-being. We all know people who have a sense of well-being and they don't have very much. They always seem to be able to share. They always seem to be able to give. Now, let's go back to the father. The father who always knew where his supply was, always knew that God was his source, could supply to his son who wanted to spend money recklessly, could supply to that son what he wanted, who always knew where his supply was so that when the boy came back, he could welcome him back and never ask him a question about where the money went or how can we spend all this money, but welcome him back with generosity, giving him clothing and jewelry. It said they gave him a ring and gave him a place to stay and prepared a party. The father who knew that God was always his source. Then we have that rascal, that's second son, that chap that just couldn't welcome back his brother, who really had sort of a limited idea of supply, and He was like the fish swimming in the ocean. He was right in the middle of all that supply. The fish who wonders where the water is. You know, his supply is always around him. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is mine. The Father, again, telling us that he knows where his supply is, and all that he has is his Father. The Father never doubting that he can share with that son also, and with his other son, and still have enough. Think of the wonderful idea of prosperity there is. Think of how great that Father is and his feeling of prosperity. Think how assured he is that he will always have what he needs. Now, of course, it's wonderful to talk about all this prosperity, and it's wonderful to say that these people have expressed prosperity one way or another. But how do we get it? How do we achieve this for ourselves? Because, of course, the story is not very much good if it can't be applied in our own life. Well, I would suggest to you that we learn and we hear a lot about denial and affirmation. Let us deny that we can ever be separated from our source. Let us affirm that this universe is just teeming with ideas for us to use, and all we need to do is connect with those ideas. And we can connect with them if we will take a few moments each day to affirm and to listen to what God is trying to tell us. Sometimes it means that we might have to go over the cliff into that abyss. But you know what they tell us? When we go over that cliff, we're either going to do one of two things. We're either going to find something firm to fall down on and stand on, or we're going to be taught how to fly. Now, I'd sort of like to learn how to fly. I mean, I've stepped off and gotten on a firm ground often enough. I'd rather not learn how to fly. I'd like to be that little water bug that became that wonderful fly. Let us take time to get connected with our source and know that God is always in charge of our life. Prayer and meditation does not necessarily have to be long. It doesn't necessarily have to be an enforced sitting in a position for a long time. It can be as you are walking up and down these halls, as you are walking back and forth through your car, as you are blessing your meal. Eric Butterworth has an interesting statement in one of his books, and I read it over the weekend just to show you how God does supply to us what we need to know. He said there is 10 minutes of every day that are the most important 10 minutes of our life, of each day. 5 minutes in the morning, and 5 minutes at night. 5 minutes before you get out of bed, and 5 minutes before you go to sleep. Those 5 minutes are to be spent thanking God, getting in touch with our source, affirming that we have all the supply we will ever need. Turn around. Open up your awareness and never doubt that you are an heir of a wealthy parent whose pleasure, remember, it is God's pleasure to give you